Bio, and then we're going to show a short video right after that. And if Michael, when we do the video, if you'd get both sets of lights. Dave Wilkes is the president and CEO of the Atlanta Police Foundation. The Police Foundation is a 501c3 established to secure resources for the Atlanta Police Department and be a voice for the community. It's governed by 32 board member trustees, law enforcement, education, nonprofit. The foundation has driven down crime by over 50%, and Dave's been in charge of that since 2005. In 2009, Dave met with law enforcement executives, business and community leaders, and candidates running for mayor to form something called the Public Safety First Action Plan, and it was released in 2010. It provides key recommendations for Mayor Reed and the leaders of the city to make the police force the best it can be. Before joining the foundation, Dave retired as special agent in charge of the U.S. Secret Service Georgia Division. During his 22-year tenure in the Secret Service, Dave served as special agent in charge of office investigations, as well as assistant special agent in charge of President Protection Detail, serving under President Clinton and President Bush. Upon retirement, Dave was the youngest member of the Secret Service with the rank of senior executive. Dave also ran the security detail and principal federal official for the G8 summit down at Sea Island, Savannah, and I was actually a volunteer down there, and those guys did a great job. It's pretty amazing to watch them, how they secured that entire area. Dave was awarded the Distinguished Service Award from President Bush for his supervision of agents' decisive action on September 11, 2001. And this year is about heroes with the district and with our club, and you're a true hero, and I appreciate your service and dedication. And I've had the pleasure of working with some of these guys in the past as volunteers and whatnot, and they're the most professional group of folks that I've ever been around in my life. So I appreciate your service, and I'm going to show a short video, and then I'll bring Dave up. We can have the lights both set.
Started my morning off with a morning run. And I can remember running on the golf course of this resort where I was staying, and it was pretty dark. And I'm sure some of the people associated with the hotel looked out the window and saw these headlights illuminating a path for a runner, saying, "Who is this nut out there running?" And they went to the school to tout this curriculum. It was all part of our plan to highlight education reform.
This just into our newsroom. A plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. Let's get this live update from 1010 Wins correspondent.
I had been notified that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. At first I thought it was a light aircraft. And my reaction was, man, either the weather was bad or something extraordinary happened to the pilot.
Good morning, boys and girls. Good morning. Good morning. I have brought you to meet the most wonderful guest. Would you please stand with the President of the United States?
Good morning. The classroom was full of kids who were reading.
Read this word the fast way. Get ready. Mad. Yes, mad. Get ready. Cat. Yes, cat. Get ready.
And in the back of the classroom was a full press corps and staffers and some adults. And I'm intently listening to the lesson.
Read these words the fast way. Get ready. Yes, yes,
and I felt a presence behind me. And Andy Card's Massachusetts accent was whispering in my ear, "A second plane has hit the second tower. America is under attack."
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America.
A lot of times the president is placed in a bubble or a capsule. In this case, I was able to see the reactions of our fellow citizens. the shock, the concern, the horror, the worry.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
And I didn't linger much in the classroom after I had given my statement because the Secret Service was anxious to get me on the move.
I wanted to just give you a feel for what it must have been like that day for Dave and the rest of his Secret Service agents, and I appreciate his support. And also I just want to mention too that you know, we've been working with human trafficking, and I mentioned right after the Passion Conference that $100,000 was given to the city of Atlanta to create a human trafficking division. Well, that's Dave's, it went to Dave, and he's the one creating that division, and he just offered as much help as he could give us today, and I told him what we were doing. I appreciate that, your support, and thanks for the service. Please welcome Dave Wilkerson.
Good afternoon. Well, thank you, Dave. Thanks for that kind introduction. It's good to have some good PR with the Secret Service after this Cartagena thing. My hair was a lot darker in those photos, too. My kids always point that out when they see all these documentaries on 9/11. But again, I'm Dave Wilkinson, President of the Police Foundation. I spent 22 years with the Secret Service, and I'm really glad to be with you all here today. As I said, it's been a tough few weeks for the Secret Service, but I thought I'd spend the bulk of my time talking about the Secret Service, talking about my time in federal law enforcement, and then I'll end it a little bit with the Police Foundation and our more local law enforcement. But I do want to leave plenty of time for questions at the end as well. You know, first of all, let me say that law enforcement, it is a dangerous game. Obviously, it's a dangerous profession. The Secret Service is no exception. I'll tell you one particular instance where I felt my life was in danger in the Secret Service. I was on the golf course with President Clinton, and we were riding in the golf cart, and I was riding shotgun, as they say. The President was driving along the edge of the woods looking for his golf ball, telling some old Arkansas homespun story, as he often did. And all of a sudden he said, "There it is!" And about that time I looked up, obviously he meant the golf ball. As I looked up, a tree branch hit the support on the golf cart, and it snapped back and hit me right in the forehead. So I kind of came to, sort of laying in the seat, blood coming down the front of my face, and the President saying, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" So that's how dangerous the Secret Service can be. And I've got a lot of other stories of danger like that. But no, I love being part of the Secret Service. I love the mission. I love the service that I was able to provide to the country. You know, I spent, again, 22 years with the service. I spent about 8.5, almost 9 years on the presidential detail. Normally that assignment's about a 4-year assignment because of the travel is so intense and the stress and all that, obviously. So it's typically a 4-year assignment. But I was lucky enough to be promoted several times to go back to the detail, ultimately spending about 9 years. You know, during that time I saw, you know, pretty much, I've been on every continent, saw almost any country you can imagine, seen about anything you can imagine with the President. But you know, I tell you what really I probably remember more than anything from my times on the President, one of the things I often think about is the personal conversations, the, you know, watching the President in action, watching them run the country, and, you know, thinking about all the news media and the stories of, you know, what the President's doing this for a political agenda or that for a political agenda. But I can tell you that working closely as the assistant agent in charge of the President's detail for both Clinton and Bush, they were both 100% fully committed to the American people, and to watch them do that every day, it was inspiring. And obviously, you know, they have their faults. They're humans just like any of us. But watching them basically day in and day out with the dedication, I think it's important to let you all know that is something that basically I saw every day. There's no magic to it. There's no you know, conspiracy at all. Basically, usually what you see on the news is exactly what it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Basically, if they're, you know, did something wrong, then yeah, they pretty much did. So, but anyway, it's inspiring to see the work being done at the White House and at the Oval Office, and I can tell you, I saw it every day. You saw the video of the events of the school. I was with the President, you know, just getting out of the limousine when we got the word of that first plane hitting the building. As the President said in the video, of course, we naturally assumed that it was a isolated incident or an accident. Of course, being the Secret Service, we assumed the worst, and we began basically preparations to evacuate the school and evacuate the president in the event that the direction of interest indicated that it was toward the president. At the time, it didn't. Of course, it all looked like it was something isolated to New York City. As we did that, in the video, you saw the president speaking in the classroom. I was standing just to his left there. And the interesting thing about it was, and I know the president's received some criticism as to the fact he stayed there and continued to read the stories to these kids, but I thought I'd make it clear exactly how this went down. As we walk into a classroom like this, you can imagine a teacher's lounge to the right here, the staff and other Secret Service and other folks are in that room. The president and myself walk out into the classroom. So the president's sitting on the stage, you saw with the principal of the school and one of the teachers, and I was standing to the left of him. Well, all of a sudden they told me, of course, on my earphone, through the radio, that the second plane had hit the building. So immediately I started bringing my agents in. Basically, we started making our plans to evacuate. I was being briefed by a lot of different things, stage left, as the president was speaking. And all of a sudden it hit me, he's the only one that doesn't know that this second plane's hit the building. And you got the news media in the back of the room, so I'm thinking, well, somebody better tell him quick, because one of those news media members are going to shout it out here, because you know somebody's telling them in their ear as well. So finally, Andy, the plan was I was going to grab the president, we were going to go back into the holding room, and we were going to fully brief him then, but it just went on. As you can imagine, second-year-old kids, one of them started asking the president what his dog's name was, what did he feed his dog, stuff like that. And the president just kept going. So the bottom line is, eventually he came out and whispered that in his ear. So obviously, you can imagine how tough that would be, knowing all the cameras are on you, somebody telling you something like that on television. It was, on the cameras, it was something I wouldn't want to be part of. But I tell you one thing about 9/11, the president also received some criticism for not going back to Washington. And let me kind of set the record straight on that as well. It's really not his call. The Secret Service, our mission, our job, our role in this government is to keep the president and the office of the presidency safe at all times. So if that means whoever that person may be, basically, if they want to be president, they have to go along with whatever the Secret Service does at that time in an effort to keep them safe. So it was our decision at that time, based on the mountain of intelligence information that we were receiving, very sketchy, going in all different directions, some of it directed toward Air Force One and the president, that there was no way we could go back to Washington at that time. So I won't go through the litany of things we did throughout that day, but I will tell you this. It was admirable of the president that we spent the entire day in his cabin in Air Force One basically debating, arguing. There's a lot of adjectives I guess you could throw to it, but basically he wanted to go back to Washington. And I need to be back in the Oval Office. The American people expect me to be there. We're not going. We're not going, Mr. President. Until we get these issues resolved, until we know it's safe, we're not taking you back. So it wasn't until later when we were in Nebraska, basically, when we got a full briefing, and ultimately all the planes were down on the ground, that we felt like it was safe to bring him back. But later, I saw some criticism. I saw one individual on I believe it was Leno or Letterman, saying that I know for a fact the president didn't want to come back that day. And I thought, well, whether you're Republican or Democrat, come on. That's just not being honest, because anybody who's on the plane, which was really just us, the Secret Service agents and just a few staff people at the front of the plane. Actually, there weren't any staff people other than Andy Card. We're the only ones to do the story. But anyway, it was a heck of a day, obviously. It was something I was proud of the Secret Service, proud of the mission, proud of the president as well. I'll say the same things for President Clinton. I was always very proud of the dedication, the efforts that I saw him put forth in the Oval Office. He worked countless hours, tireless hours. I remember one particular incident, in Yemen, the USS Cole had just been bombed. And there was a discussion about the fact that the Yemeni officials were not going to allow the American investigators in there to really investigate the bombing. And we were on the way to the golf course, and the president, we passed a call, or the White House communications folks passed a call to the president from the president of Yemen. And President Clinton, boy, really gave it to him from the backseat of that car. And I sat there and listened to it all. He said, "You will do this, or we won't do that." In other words, and I was really proud of the fact he wasn't beating around the bush. He gave it to the guy, just the way everybody in this room would have wanted him to do that, to represent our country. And so anyway, I was proud of that. Now, on the other hand, sometimes you got to be prepared as the assistant agent in charge of the detail. You might remember back during the Clinton years, what was the young man's name? Elian Gonzalez. Did anybody remember that? He was a young boy that they wanted to take to Cuba, and it became the biggest story on the news for several weeks. The president says, "Dave, I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay," and I'm thinking he's going to complain about something with the Secret Service detail, ask us to do something different, whatever. And he says, what do you think I ought to do about this Elian Gonzalez thing? So I answered like any good Secret Service agent. I said, I don't know, Mr. President, what do you think we ought to do? And he spent the next 10 minutes telling me what he thought what we should do. But you know, communications, I know in all your businesses, is probably the most important aspect of really having a successful venture in any way. In the Secret Service, there was no exception to that. Communication was so critical. I'll give you an example. President Bush, the day before the inauguration, we're going to fly him back to D.C. for the inauguration. I was in charge of his presidential-elect detail down in Austin, Texas. So we're out at his ranch, and the president out there used to do what we call clearing cedar, which is basically mean taking a chainsaw, cutting a bunch of trees down and burning them. Real dangerous stuff for the President of the United States to be doing those. So anyway, as a supervisor, I've got to be in there close and really help him. Well, we're standing on the side of this mountain, and the President's using his chainsaw. He's got earphones on. But I noticed, and everybody that's worked a chainsaw knows, when you take your finger off the trigger, the blade's supposed to stop turning, right? Well, I noticed when he's taking his finger off the trigger, it was still turning. And at the same time, I noticed he's pulling on this tree limb, and I'm thinking, well, this doesn't make any sense either. We're standing on the side of a mountain here. So I got my hands around his waist, and I'm yelling, Mr. President, stop, stop, stop. And he's not hearing me. And about that time, he turns to say, what? The tree limb breaks loose. He falls into me in sort of a bear hug. And he and I roll down this mountainside. And it was like something out of a Saturday morning cartoon, because the chainsaw is wedged between us, and it's going. And we're rolling, this thing looking like it, and I'm hearing he's screaming, oh, like, you know, and I'm thinking this thing's probably cut his fingers off, his toes off, there's no telling what it's done. And so we get to the bottom of the hill, and he'd sprained his knee, and the chainsaw had literally cut 2 of the fingers of my glove right off, basically. And it cut me in several other places, but nothing significant. So anyway, it was poor communications on our part. And I told the president, we got to the bottom of the hill, I said, you're either going to make me, get me fired or make me famous, I don't know what, for getting the president killed with a chainsaw. But we're not doing that anymore. Of course, we continue to do it. But there was another story where there was the side of a bluff where there was a tree literally growing vertical off the side of a mountain, literally about 100 feet up. So you would literally have to rappel out there to cut it down. He says, I want to cut the tree down. The whole time I was on the president's detail, I said, absolutely not. You're not doing it. Absolutely not. So about a year, not even a year, about 6 months after I left the White House, came to Atlanta, I get this little postcard, Office of the President. And in there, he's got me a little handwritten note and a photo of that tree gone and him standing there on the side of the hill holding that tree. He thought he'd rub it in a little bit. But I'll say one more thing about communications that can really hurt us. And, the Secret Service, you can imagine every step is choreographed, and, every attention to detail to the max you can imagine for a presidential visit. I could go on and on about that. But one of the things we do when the president goes to any venue is we identify exactly where he's going to use the restroom, obviously, right? So it's got to be a private area. It's got to be an area we've designated. So we walk into a hotel. I believe we were in Detroit. We walk into this hotel, and we're walking down the hall, and as the supervisor, I'm walking behind the president. The president turns to me, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. Hit the head, whatever he said. I said, okay. So I start to radio to one of my guys, take us to the bathroom. There's always an agent leading us, of course. Well, some young guy, like on the staff or something, says, President, there's a bathroom in here. And before I know it, the president's like just jumped into some room, right? Well, of course, the whole area is secure, but this isn't part of the plan, right? So the Secret Service, we're having fits. I realized what he was in the locker room for the cooks and the cleaning staff and all that. And I thought, well, that's all secure. They wouldn't be here if they weren't secure, right? So he and I walk over there, and I walk up and say, hey, you're in the wrong bathroom, but, it's fine. And as he goes over there, he walks over to the stall door, and he rips the door open. Now, you have to imagine this. There's a guy sitting in the stall. He's about 300 pounds. He's got a cook or dishwashing uniform on, and he's reading the newspaper. And this is all the president sees. The president slams the door and says, oh, I'm sorry. And he walks over to the urinal, and then he's standing, he goes, oh, man, that was embarrassing. I go, no, I said, it's pretty funny, actually. And he said, and I said, he goes, what do you mean? He goes, I said, well, can you imagine? I said, that guy's going to be telling this story for 30 years, and nobody's going to believe it. But I want to leave time for questions here, so because I know there's probably some questions about a lot of the Secret Service stuff, and I want to commend you all for what you do here with Rotary. One of the reasons I took the job with the Police Foundation, left the Secret Service to do that, is public service is what I believe in. And working with the board members, these are the business leaders of the city of Atlanta, we made a decision that we could work closely with the mayor of Atlanta and the police chief of Atlanta to really develop and execute the strategic plan to make the city of Atlanta safer. And as Dave said earlier, that we've been able to make the city 50% safer than it was just 8 years ago. And so we're really proud of that. And it just goes to show you the spirit of collaboration between the public and private sector, especially in the area of law enforcement, really works. So there's a lot more stories I could tell, and I'm glad to tell a few more, but I always usually run out of time for questions for these things. So why don't I stop here now and let you all ask some questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, is this, okay. When that plane took off from Sarasota, were you on the plane? And could you describe that takeoff?
Yeah. What he's talking about is the ascent that we left, and it's become sort of historical in the fact that it seems like people are starting to talk about that a lot more now than they had. And the fact that basically we took off just like this in Air Force One. So imagine seeing a 747 pretty much take off like that. Well, let me say there's a lot of security protocols that are top secret, classified information that I can't really go into. But I will tell you this, that it was at my direction for the fact that certain security countermeasures cannot be put into place until the plane reaches a certain altitude. If that makes sense. So the sooner we reach that altitude, the safer we were. And so ultimately, that was a decision we made. So as the colonel pilot for Air Force One told me, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Well, you better have everybody buckle in." Because in Air Force One, it's not like an airliner, right? I mean, you know, this is not, you know, a public statement, but I can tell you that we're not usually putting our seatbelts on. And we're not even usually sitting down. Actually, half the time we're walking up and down the aisles while the plane's taking off. So my point was, he said, everybody better buckle in, and they did. And that was the reason for that. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to change the subject to human sex trafficking, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. The club is very interested in having an impact on human sex trafficking, but the conversation that we haven't had is about how we impact men who are the customers. We've talked about the girls. And from the point of view of the work that you're doing, can you share with the club what we can do, what you will do to keep, I mean, we have to kill the demand side of this.
Right.
Someone will always find a supply. Well,
that's a great question, and I'm actually looking for the answer to that myself as well. We've put together a team that's developing a strategic plan to decide exactly what this unit's going to do. You can imagine the police department is committed now. They've assigned an entire unit, basically a lieutenant, I believe it is, running the unit. The officers are in there, and they're developing their plan exactly what they're going to do. But I would have to guess right now if I said exactly to try to answer your question. But the bottom line is, within a month or so, they're going to have that plan fully vetted out and ready to execute it. Next question. Yes, sir.
Would you care to comment on safety of the students at Georgia Tech, and maybe even comment on right to carry concealed weapons there?
Well, that's a tough one, you know, and you know, anybody you ask about the right to carry, you know, you're going to get a different answer. Some law enforcement officials even the same. Obviously, most in law enforcement believe the more guns you have out there, obviously the more dangerous it's going to be. But it's one of those issues that I would be giving you my personal opinion, but I can tell you, if you had 20 law enforcement folks in the room, they're all going to debate that a little bit. But I will tell you, having guns in airports, college campuses, things like that is a huge concern. Obviously, the federal government's a huge concern of the local police chiefs. Now, as far as the security of the students at Georgia Tech, of course, most important thing they can do, of course, is communicate with the Atlanta Police Department, collaborate with the Atlanta Police Department, insist the Atlanta Police Department work with them in everything they do. One of the programs we have right now is called Operation Shield, which is a video surveillance project where it's going to be ultimately a $40, $50 million project. We're taking all the video surveillance cameras in the city of Atlanta, integrating them all into one network, layering them with analytics, and ultimately using these cameras obviously to increase the footprint in the eyes and ears of the police department. The Georgia Tech cameras will be brought into this system. So the best they can do to collaborate is obviously important. But the other thing is really police visibility. It starts with the visibility. The more police officers, the more signage, the more lighting, the more police officer insignias in and around Georgia Tech, the safer they're going to be. Policing always starts with that police visibility. If you have that visibility, is a deterrent factor, obviously, and can make these criminals take their crimes elsewhere. So what happens, as you can imagine, these criminals, gang members, or whatever, see some of these areas, Georgia Tech and others, basically as a ripe area. Some kids will have some money in their pocket and a good place to commit their crimes. But there's no easy answer to that other than everybody rolling up their sleeves and continue to working together. And of course, the police department, Georgia Tech, like Atlanta and every other police department, their resources are strained, their budgets are strained every year. They're always trying to do more with less. So what they really have to embrace is smart policing. Video integration, things like that is really what I'm talking about with smart policing. Next question. Well, are you talking about for 9/11? Well, David asked what was it like where we landed on 9/11 with Air Force One, but we went to Barksdale Air Force Base first. And the reason we did that, and I don't think this is giving away any real secrets, is on Air Force One, you've got a plane full of folks, as you can imagine. You've got news media, you've got White House staff, you have guests of the president, you have some political folks, all on the plane. All of them needed to go. We needed to get them off the plane. So the president also wanted to have a national address. We did a quick national address that you saw from the gymnasium there at the school. What we did is when he finished speaking, we took him into the room, we briefed real quick, we said, we got to get out of here. Let's go in here, let you give a quick 2-minute address to the national audience, but in the gymnasium. And then we went to Barksdale Air Force Base. But when we got there, one of the reasons we chose Barksdale Air Force Base is they were doing a security exercise that day. So they had the base cleared of people. They had all the soldiers, everybody was basically on alert, and so it was basically already prepared for, there was nothing they needed to do to prepare. Our problem was, of course, we didn't have any armored limousines or anything like that, so we had to put the president in Humvees, but that was not a big deal. Next question.
From your experience, having seen everything you've seen, what would you consider the single most dangerous threat to our country?
Well, that's obviously, it would be easy to say Al-Qaeda and that sort of thing, but I will tell you that the threats come up in all different directions every day. The President of the United States gets a luminous number of threats every day. Some of them are real, some of them are not real. The individual assassin, though, is probably the thing that keeps the Secret Service worried more than anyone else. There's no... in other words, there's no signs of this. There's a lot of folks that threaten the president. They make threats. They're mentally disturbed in most cases, and ultimately it turns out they would not have the ability to carry out that threat, but often they could. So, as you can imagine, the Secret Service, we have layers of security, 360-degree coverage security. Typically, you have Secret Service agents, police, and in some cases, military. And ultimately, it's so important to make sure every bit of that security plan is thought through. It cannot be penetrated. Most importantly, that it's seamless. And what I mean by that is because we always expect the fact there are individuals out there for the purpose of attacking the president that are probing to see where exactly I could get in the security plan. You just watch TV at night, you can come up with a half a dozen ways you can sneak a gun into some place or something like that. Now, if you're talking primarily about the country, obviously, then I think it's the radicalism, obviously, from the Middle East that is clearly the thing that we have to continue to keep our eye on. Next question. Yes, sir.
Dave, my son-in-law was with Secret Service under the older George Bush, and he's now moved over to ATF. But I'm going to run some stories by you a little bit after the meeting.
Okay, I'm glad.
He's told me a lot of stuff, I just can't believe it's true.
Well, one of the things I want to say, in case I don't have time to say it after the questions, is that with the Cartagena incident, obviously, that the Secret Service has taken a real hit here. And as I told most of the news media members that have interviewed me, is I understand why this is so newsworthy. Obviously, you have a squeaky clean agency that prides itself on the ultimate professionalism. You got the president, you got prostitutes. You got all the ingredients to really make this a big news story. But the truth of the matter is this. One of the things that makes a Secret Service agent proud to be part of that brotherhood is that there are no exceptions. You are expected to be on your P's and Q's at every moment. You're expected to dress right, speak right, act right, on the job, off the job. There are no exceptions. I remember when I first got the president's detail, one of the supervisors came by me and said, make sure you wear tie shoes. Okay, all right. So I asked him, what are you talking about, tie shoes? I thought he meant, you know, they didn't want you wearing slip-on dress shoes because maybe they'd come off on a rope line, people stepping on your feet. They said, no, it doesn't look as professional. And so the bottom line is, there are no exceptions at all. So this incident down in Cartagena is just really, has former agents like myself and current agents just really blown away by the agents could have acted so reprehensibly. And I mean, it's because again, you've got an agency that's mission driven, professionalism is everything to the agency, attention to detail at every level, and there's really no exceptions. In other words, every Secret Service agent knows if you step out of line in this pit, you're fired. You're fired immediately. There's no exceptions, there's no counseling, there's no, you know, we're going to send you and get you retrained. You're just gone. And so you know, that's really the message. And people ask me, will the Secret Service survive this and all that? Of course they will, because, you know, never had an incident like that and probably never will again. But it's really unfortunate that a few knuckleheads could really, you know, I think the president called them knuckleheads, could you know, harm the reputation of an agency that does such a great job day in and day out. So we have time for one more question? One more question. Oh, yes, ma'am. Yeah, she has.
Is there a typical path to becoming a Secret Service agent?
Yes, there is. And typically a Secret Service agent is going to be age 28, 32 years old, somewhere in that range when they're hired. And typically they're going to have, obviously, a college degree, in most cases a master's degree, speak at least, in most cases, a couple of languages, either military background or police background. If not that, at least something, some sort of experience in the private sector. But one of the things, and I was in charge of hiring for the Secret Service for a year, we pride ourselves on, we don't want to ever pigeonhole ourselves into, we just want ex-military, we just want ex-police, we just want accountants, we just want, you know, computer folks. We really want a mix of all of that. Because you know what I used to tell Secret Service agents when they come on the job? I'd say, if you're nervous about wondering whether you can do this or not, don't be. I said, because it ain't rocket science, as they say. I said, if you work hard, if you're dedicated, anybody can be a Secret Service agent. You know, now, you have to be physically fit. There's a whole lot of running, a whole lot of athletic stuff. So they hire a lot of athletes. I mean, at one point, my shift at the White House, 3 guys out of 8 were in the starting backfield for Notre Dame, or starting defensive backfield for Notre Dame previously. So they hire a lot of athletes. I was a baseball player, is one of the reasons I got on the job. So, and that's just obviously because of the rigors of the job and all the travel. And, you know, let's face it too, you gotta like to shoot guns and, you know, work out a lot and do all that stuff too. So, but the actual answer to your question is go to college, get a degree, get a job, basically, work hard, and most importantly, stay out of trouble. Because I can't tell you how often tremendous candidates for the Secret Service are turned down because of a decision they made when they were 16 years old. I tried cocaine once when I was 16. Well, that whole file was just built on them. We had them rated as an A+, right out the window, basically, because they've done that. So, if anything, as folks hearing this today have a son or daughter or friend or someone that you think might want to be a Secret Service agent, that's the first thing to tell them. Whatever you do, think about what you do now, how they could impact you, because you can't lie about it, because you're going to have a polygraph test and the whole works. So, stay clean, you know, on top of everything else. Okay, well, I think that's the end of the questions, and I want to thank you all again for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Best of luck to the Rotary Club.
Great job. Thank you for your service. I guess that rules out most of the Rotarians. Stay clean, right? Especially this club. I do want to answer Donna's question a little bit. You know, when Bill and I were doing research on human trafficking, the one thing that they told us is men are not involved in this issue. And they said by getting a Rotary involved, even though our club's 30% women, there's not very many men's organizations, and they were extremely excited to see that men talking about it is a first step. And so I think that that's going to be a huge impact, and that's what Bill and I have seen when going around and talking to folks. So I think that's why it's so important. So Dave, I appreciate you being here, and I'd love to talk with you more about the human trafficking. We'd meet with you in Trey. Great to see you here. So Johnny's a big supporter of what we're doing, human trafficking, and a good friend of this club. His dad was a past member, so.